Hey, Mariah, how are you tonight? Good. How's everything?
Pretty good.
What's the big sigh for?
Hmm?
What was the big sigh for?
Oh, I was inside and it was such a nice day.
Yeah, it's pouring here.
Uh,
Are you first tonight?
I believe so. I don't know. I got so many windows open. I don't know what's what anymore today. I can double check real quick. I think I am.
I reckon I can do that too. I'm looking.
Yeah, I am.
You are. Then Nate, and then Zach. Okay. So you've sat in on the conversations. My dogs are back from a walk and it's pouring, so they're not happy about being wet. So you're going to hear that in the background till they chill out a little bit.
That's
Now
fine.
they're both talking to each other. So you've overheard the conversations from the last session and the one before that, and you've maybe had a chance to look at the photographs and get maybe a better feel for the neighborhood, which I appreciate is difficult for you to do because of where you are and where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we coaxed you to move further south from your original site sort of selection to maybe something closer to Bennett Park. And I'm wondering if I'm wondering where you are now. What have you thought about as a site boundary? We can talk about that first, and then we can talk a little bit more about your impressions and what you're wanting to do.
Yeah. I thought we were gonna cover the overall overlap of where everyone was on Monday, so I forgot to put that in my presentation. Let me just screen share with you. So I decided to go with the little block between Brush, Smith, Beaubien, and Chandler.
Yep.
And specifically the houses that are on the northern end.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably more than likely demolishing the ones that are on the lower end. I have seen some pictures and it looks like they're pretty dilapidated, but I was gonna have I think it's Mateo's going back this weekend.
Yeah, and I may join him. So
just some more pictures.
can I interrupt you on that? Rather than suggesting that you're going to demolish them as kind, it's like when you say things like that, you need to recognize that in just the way you say it, you've kind of already transmitted the opinion. And if I were like a staunch advocate for saving all Detroit buildings, that would rub rub us the wrong way, right? So I want you to be. You're very articulate, and so I'm hard on you about that because you're articulate. I want you to make sure you're really, really careful about how you unpack these things. Given your distance, it's going to be really important for you to sort of frame up and tee up the way you say things, the way you explain your ideas and your opinions based on what you can validate, what you can know.
Okay.
And so I know I'm being crabby, but I really want you to sort of think about that, because I think it's going to help you be a really strong presence, a really commanding presence in studio and later on. So, but I don't disagree with you. So, but I just want you to think about how you explain those things next time.
Very understandable, yeah. And I guess I should have prefaced saying that with the fact that from pictures that I have seen thus far, it appears that these homes or structures, if we're just going to, since they look abandoned, that it would take more to rehabilitate them than it would to build new.
Right. And and that can be the argument, right? That can be the persuasive argument that one makes. Now, my personal opinion, because I remembered our conversation from Wednesday when we were down there on Saturday.
Okay.
I remember our conversation, Mariah, and this block, and me saying to you or someone else in general, why is it that no one looked at this darn block? Because it's kind of an interesting block, because it's got 8 houses on it. It's north of Bennett Park, and it's got the alley, blah blah blah, and it's a little bit more consolidated. Because anything south of it is kind of wonky, right? Because it gets like between Bethune and Custer, it's like a double street front. You get further south, and there's not as much housing, right? So like this is kind of like this is a little nougat. This is a little like gem of a block for all intents and purposes. I drove up Brush, and that first west house on Smith is pretty much gone. And I would probably say that if I bought that lot, I'd probably take it down to the first floor deck, right? And build up from that, and sort of keeping that footprint and maybe expanding it. But definitely, definitely be mindful or careful based on what you can tell, and tee it up that way. Make sure you always portray yourself as someone who's careful. And I said, because I like the strong opinion, but I want you to be extremely careful about how you come across in these things. On the other hand, I think 2 of the 3 that are on Smith are actually occupied. They're not great properties, but I think they're occupied. Now, are they squatters? Are they renters? I don't know. And even if they are one or the other, the question then is, how do you go about like improving the situation, the renovation, by renovating those homes if you're going to have to displace them? So like that becomes another layer of complexity that you all need to sort of be careful how you tee that up. But in any event, I'm actually kind of intrigued with this lot, as you know. I do think it's a little further north than maybe what anyone else is doing.
Yeah,
but,
I think
but I don't mind that, because the walk south and west, right, from there, south and west takes you through the park, which is lovely, right? It takes you through Muffy, which is really beautiful, especially this time of year. And it takes you along Brush, which is eventually going to be a 2-way street, and I think it's going to be the major sort of route through there, and over another block and a half, and you're at the first stop. So I think it's not just the distance, but it's the quality of that distance, and you're really the only person that's kind of confronting the park as part of that experience.
What I think it was one of the Nates might have pulled up one of the streets is if I want to say forecast to become a pedestrian only.
Yeah, that was I don't know if that was John R. or Brush. That was in the kind of like the long, maybe it was Mateo. I don't remember. We can go back and ask, but yeah, I mean, I think that's like in the Detroit Future City vision. I don't know that any street will ever become a sort of pedestrian only block. I mean, streets are too important for all sorts of other things like bus routes and bike routes and retail and just circulating through the city. The biggest problem with Detroit is that we have such a large number of all of these one-way streets, and that we're slowly peeling all that back to make these things a little bit more universal.
Okay. I had a general question that I was looking at. Do homes in Detroit have basements?
Most of them do. Yeah.
Okay.
We have something and these are all like 1925 homes, so they will generally always have basements. Some of the older homes may be what we call a Michigan basement, which might be a rubble foundation on a poured trench footing, a rubble stone foundation, like with daubing, right, in mortar to sort of impede water infiltration, which it of course does a miserable job at impeding it. And generally the columns or stanchions might be like tree trunks or wood timbers, and there might be a steel beam, but generally it's all wood beams and then joists sort of borne on the wood beams. And then those basements are, they were generally hand dug. And because of the soil conditions that we have in this part of the country, this part of the state, it was generally clay, hard clay. So we probably didn't, dig much deeper than like 5 feet, kind of like the depth of a man with a shovel. That was kind of like as hard, or that was as hard as it would get, and that would be as deep as we would go because of that clay. So
gotcha.
That is pretty typical in these older and smaller homes. The homes like these wood frame homes. Then those homes might have had just a few years later, they might have had the same foundation, but with a concrete masonry wall as the basement wall, and then steel post and a steel beam to pick up a much larger sort of open span. And then I believe that the the stone and masonry buildings, the prouder, more stately, I guess I'd say nicer homes that were maybe larger in size, would probably have either a concrete masonry unit foundation wall or a poured wall. And those might have been dug a little bit deeper, probably with mechanical equipment, because they were maybe for a specific family, and they used an architect or a contractor to sort of to do that work. So generally always a basement. But again, the basements aren't dug deep. But what they do to make up for the ceiling height is they elevate the first floor, Mariah, about 5 feet out of the ground. So that's why our porches are so long and the first floor is so sort of tall against the street wall.
That's what I've seen a lot, and that's why I was kind of like wondering what was going on with that, like what was typical.
Right. In fact, I went through 1, 2, 3, 4. I went through 4 buildings this morning, all dilapidated, and a carriage house, a garage with an apartment, literally an apartment above it, all original, all 1925 vintage, and all of the basements were block. And they were all walkable, even for me, and for other people. That's not remarkable that it was walkable for me because I'm not tall, but it was walkable for everyone else. And the historic property had the deepest basement. So everything I just said panned out in my site visit today, for example.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So having thought about that block, and hearing my sort of criticism about the way to approach the site, it might be useful for you to sort of set it up or frame it up in such a way that your goal is to preserve existing buildings and add new buildings, preserve existing buildings where practicable, where it's economical. So long as there's a roof on it, there's probably a way to save them. Obviously, the more blight or the more damage to them, the more expensive it is. And so I think you can assume that some people are going to raise their brow and be uncomfortable with you if you tear anything down, because there are tree huggers in this community. And I think also the idea, perhaps for this studio, just to make it easier for yourself, is to assume that everything is something too renovate, suspending the question of cost or financing or economics, assuming that existing buildings are worth saving at all costs, right? And the reason I say that is because Detroit has had this extraordinary history of getting rid of everything, just erasing and bulldozing everything, and it's definitely an issue. And I think wherever you have like these cases in your particular site where you've got a building and a gap, and then several buildings, the space between those buildings is actually a low-hanging fruit to do outdoor programming spaces that already has in it, in a cross section like this, already has in it some interesting proportion and scale, because you've got interesting facades that are pressuring that space and helping define it, that you would be really, really hard pressed to create with new architecture. So like retaining even facades is an important way, not only just in saving the object, but in helping create really, really poignant outdoor spaces that are in the gaps between buildings. Now, since you have this like nougat of a site, right? That is like this perfect shape, this perfect square. And since we didn't necessarily talk explicitly, you certainly didn't talk about the site, at all in your sort of floor plan diagrams last Monday. But other people, like I'm looking at Judd right now. Judd started to do that, right? And so did others, including Mateo. I want to nudge you to start thinking about the site. And in the case of my conversation Monday night with Mateo, all of a sudden we started talking about units per acre, density, quantity, right? And what can that square block, which is probably an acre, right? It's probably 250 feet deep. It's probably 250 feet long because it looks a square, right? What does that give me? 625?
Yes.
So that's 2 acres. Well, divide that by 43,560. That's an acre and a half, right?
So yeah, it's a lot of.
So so like, how many homes are on that right now? That's 8, right? Homes divided by 1.43 acres. That's 5.6 units per acre, right? So what if you tried to do 22 units per acre or 25 units per acre, right? Suddenly, you're up over 30, maybe even pushing 35 units on that parcel. And so now you've got to be thinking, well, how do I do that? I can't, like, current ordinances and requirements for that neighborhood is really calling for single family residential, traditional residential neighborhood.
Right.
And, even if it was all filled in, you'd have maybe 15? How many houses would you have? How many lots are on that square block?
It's actually more than I expected. Hold on, I have it on another document. I can bring it up real quick. South end of that is actually divided up smaller than the northern end. I think the northern end is only 5 or 6, and the bottom part I think is 8 or 9.
Okay, so that's unusual. Maybe the northern end got wider lots because they were shallower, right? and maybe the southern line along Smith got narrower lots because they had deeper lots, right? So that and just in terms of lot area, they were about the same. Maybe that's what played out there. I'm not sure. You should look at like loveland.org, the website that tells you who owns what. Have you looked at that yet?
Sorry, you cut out. What was that?
Who owns this? Have you seen that website?
I don't think I have.
I think it's Loveland or something like that. Loveland, Detroit. No, it's not it. Who owns this property? Oh, I'm having a brain cramp here. Okay, makeloveland.com, M-A-K-E, loveland.com. You may have to sign up for it. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. They just want you in their system, right? And it helps you dial in on each lot, the status of the lot in terms of its dimensions and sizes, whether the land is current or delinquent in taxes, for instance, who actually owns that land, and the lot size and dimensions and that sort of thing, and you can and each lot, Mariah, is hot, right? So like you hover your cursor over it and it's in, like piano keys, you can count the number of lots on the north side and the south side. So I would like drill into that lot now, try to know and understand by researching that through that website, for example, as much as you can about those parcels, and then sort of with that knowledge, right? If it's got like 15 lots, let's say it has 16, 8 and 8, right? 8 on one side, 8 on the other, for example. Then that says that's basically, 16 divided by 1.43. That's like 11 units per acre, right? So that's really small, right? That's a low number. And current sort of theories about urban form is that we need to be promoting more density, because as land gets more expensive, we need to find ways to mitigate the cost of land. So we need more people using that land than in that old-fashioned way of doing single-family residential lots, because that model is, part of the crisis that we have right now, right? That's part of the reason why we're doing, as you're learning, missing middle housing. Missing middle housing, as you've learned, I hope, is promoting more density. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I suggested the other night was, maybe Charleston or Fairmont has neighborhoods where density is encouraged. Tell us about that. Show us a diagram of Fairmont. Or maybe there's neighborhoods in Pittsburgh up the road. Or maybe there's neighborhoods in Annapolis across the way, right? Or Boston, or Baltimore, or Cincinnati, right? So start to like Google search, research, right? Research by saying density, neighborhoods with density, or 22 or 25 units per acre. Try to know more about what other cities and neighborhoods, maybe near you, maybe near us, maybe places you've been to, like you could say Savannah. Mm-hmm. Take Oglethorpe's grid of Savannah and do a diagram that shows us what 1.43 acres, right? Take that drawing of Savannah and do 1.4, do a comparison and contrast. Always put the 1.43 acres that you've got on Savannah's grid and compare their units per acre with yours. Then take Boston's Back Bay, do it there. Take Cincinnati's over the Rhine, do it there. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Take Pullman in Chicago and do it there. Or there's like lots of, like, I don't want to say iconic cities, but there are lots of significant neighborhoods in bigger cities that promote density and walkability. Some of them are historic. Some of them are actually new, like in the new urbanist stuff. And you could do a comparison and contrast, and you'll find that you could even do Europe. You could even do, right? You could even do cities like in England, like in London, right? You could do Bath in England. You could do Paris, right? I told somebody, I think it was Mateo, you could do the hutongs in Beijing, right? You could like compare that. You could look at the slums in Chandigarh, and where the units per acre are crazy dense. Mm-hmm. Just to give us a sort of graphical and physical comparison between what other cities have as units per acre and what you have as units per acre, and what is that sweet number? What is the sweet spot number for traditional neighborhoods that are single family houses and maybe infill? If you look at the website of Opticos Design, they actually have that diagram that shows a range of about 5 different house types. Single family residential, they have the carriage houses, they have high density low rise, they have high density high rise, right? Then they show a neighborhood that has that sort of array of typological solutions to promote density. And you could go through an exercise that explores how to then achieve that density in your site. I think that could be a very, very compelling body of research. I covered a lot of territory there.
Yeah, it all makes sense. It does. Yeah, I was looking at that today, just the site, and trying to get just dimensions of it and what was there, and if I needed to combine property lots, and looking at R3 and what that consists of, and all the rudimentary behind the scenes kind of stuff. The
thing I'm trying to get you to do now, and the thing I'll have everyone else start to do, I hope, is to begin exploring what your site looks like as it is and understand it as an existing circumstance. Know it dimensionally, know it typologically, know it in terms of like alleys and streets, dimensions and setbacks and regulations, all of that stuff. Diagram all of that. Accessory buildings, principal buildings, elevations, know your site. Demonstrate that you know the site. That's what you have to do as an architect. If we're working together in an office, and I'm always running around going to meetings, that's what I'm going to have you do, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me what we know about this so that we can respond to it as a design solution. That's the first thing. The second thing I'll have you do, working with you, is say, okay, let's do some research to understand cool, livable cities, and how are they going about introducing density. So what are those cool, livable cities? Give me 5, I'll tell you, and diagram them and compare them to us, right? And then do the analysis of them. How do they get that? What do they have? Stacked, high density, high rise, low rise, high density, single family with carriage houses? How do they achieve that density? And then begin to, and this is the third step, begin to draw stuff on the site that begins to show how the alley is engaged, how the street wall and the street setback is engaged, how you can actually approach the site strategically by adding product, by adding infill, and how many pieces, how long, how deep, what are the sort of footprints of those things, and what are the spaces between those new things and the existing things like. Basically, start developing a site strategy, a site plan that explores the figure ground of what could be, that is also talking at the same time about density, right? And that's how we would approach it.
That makes sense.
What cool cities have you been to?
I haven't traveled out of the United States.
That's okay.
I have been to...
We'll change that.
I know, I want to change that. I have a passport, I just have never had the opportunity.
Good for you.
I have been to Chicago. I have been...
Great city to look at.
Yeah, New York. I went on...
So you could look at Manhattan, right? You could look at Brooklyn. You could look at Queens, right? Mm-hmm. And those will give you units per acre, UPAs, that are off the chart. Mm-hmm. It'll be 60, 70, 90 units per acre minimum, I'm sure.
Yeah. I read an article that it appears to be done now, but like really tiny micro housing that has recently gone up in New York, and I was looking at the layouts and I was like, oh, that's tiny.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called though. I saw it in one of the articles. I've been to the northeast. It was called a northeast trip. We went, visited the Gropius House, Yale, Exeter.
The Gropius House is in Lincoln, Massachusetts.
Yeah, we were up kind of Massachusetts.
I've been through that.
Connecticut area.
Yeah.
And went around up there.
I actually met Mrs. Gropius, and I've been through that property, and it's quite interesting. Mm-hmm. It's near Walden Pond, actually. Henry David Thoreau's, important retreat site, Walden Pond, where he wrote about Walden Pond. It's very interesting. So yeah, Boston would be another place. Yale is, of course, New Haven, mm-hmm. I mean, that's really what New Haven is. But you could look at, you could look at New Haven. I suppose you could also look at like Greenwich or something like that in Connecticut, or Hartford, or one of those cities. They're not like really, really significant cities for their urban form, but they are beautiful cities.
Yeah. And then DC.
DC would be another one. I think DC. I think how far are you from Pittsburgh? 2 hours?
Pittsburgh, hour and 45, 2 hours, depending upon traffic.
So Pittsburgh would be good. Baltimore and Washington would be good. Annapolis might be good. Mm-hmm. I think. I think Savannah would be good. I think New Orleans would be fine. Right? It doesn't have to be like this exhaustive, full-blown thesis research on each of these cities. Just do a drawing of each one. Do a viewport around a chunk of the city that you can determine the units per acre. It may be off a little bit, but it would be kind of just giving you a snapshot of density. Same thing like in New York. You can look at Street View and you can count the number of floors. You can look at the aerial of the street and measure the buildings and say, okay, let's say each of the apartments are 750 square feet. And if that's the building footprint, right, this has got to be four units per floor times 10 floors. That's 40 units, right? That would be like close enough for government work in terms of your research. Because you're just trying to give us a sense of density as it relates to each of these cities. And you'll end up creating this matrix of information that gives us a way to understand the forecast of density in Detroit as it relates to places that we all know, or that we all can know or appreciate. I think that's a good way to start that. But I think the prompt here tonight is to get you to start speculating on the strategy about the site.
Okay.
What else were you thinking of doing?
Something that popped in my mind. I'm not sure if there's much merit to it or anywhere to go with it. But was doing rent to own within this somehow. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, the quote unquote American dream is, owning.
We've been talking about that, and that is kind of the crux of this class, I guess, and it's kind of the crux of the economic crisis that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And how is home ownership attainable? A rent-to-own scenario where, as you're paying rent, you're putting in some of your rent money is escrowed into a down payment, right? And by renting under certain rules and conditions that you meet or exceed, you have the right of first refusal, to buy and all of that stuff. You could like look into that and maybe propose a rent-to-own scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, when we were first buying our first house back in '94, we didn't have two nickels to rub together, and we were wondering how are we going to go. We couldn't borrow 20 or 30% down payment from mom and dad. They didn't have that kind of capital, and we didn't have that
Right.
kind of capital. So a rent-to-own scenario was something that we were talking about. Could we live in someone's carriage house and do something like that, or could we lease or rent a house that maybe we could sign paperwork to own? And just as we were getting deeper and deeper into that, the timing of the economy changed, and home ownership, the start of the bubble, if you will, home ownership changed, interest rates dropped, and the neighborhood we were living in became a very attractive place to buy. All of that created kind of a perfect storm for home ownership, and rental and the choice of rental went out the window because it was just far better to buy than to rent back then. Now very few people seem like they even want to own anymore, because the people want to move around. They want to be able to sell. People can't sell things as easily anymore. Although the thing, and that's just generally speaking, but the thing is that in Detroit, there seems to be, and you can bear this out in your research, an authentic shortage of housing opportunities, housing choices. And that is making the market really, really hot in Detroit.
Okay.
There are just not enough places for people to live in. Rents are actually approaching $2 a square foot in many new products. So if I have a, if I have $1,000 square feet, right? That's $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that's more than most mortgage payments per month. And that's just for an apartment.
Yeah, I've done quite a few calculations of different levels of income and how much of your income is to be spent on rent, and then at the cost per square footage, and
and you can diagram that. You can show a picture of a couple. They can be gender neutral, for example, because that's kind of a politically correct thing to do. You can show a pile of money sitting next to them, bunch of coins and things like that, and put a value on that and say, show the leaders off of it. Groceries, healthcare, right? Automobile, maybe there's two cars and you put an X through one of the cars as if to suggest they don't need to here. And show an apartment or a house, like a children's diagram of a house, and put money associated with each of those. right? And pretty soon, right, it's pretty straightforward calculus, right?
Yeah.
Pretty soon people clearly don't have enough to have all of those things, or they can have all of those things, but maybe they lose the car. They have to have 2 incomes or 3 incomes, like yours truly, working 2 jobs, right? I mean, so that's sort of something that has to be considered.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the cost of the apartment, and then you start to compare the percentage of what each of those things, those necessities, cost against the income. And I bet people are paying 40-50% of their salary on their homes. I bet.
Yeah, and I think it's recommended you only pay like 30 to 35. So
I'm not trying to be smarmy with you, but I'm a lot older, and I've gotten, and I work 2 jobs and all of this stuff. But we've gotten our mortgage and homeowners insurance down to 14% of our adjusted gross income. So that allows us to do other things,
mm-hmm.
maybe like travel or pay off a credit card or buy a new fence around the property like we're doing. You know what I mean? We're able to do those things because we try to live within our means. So trying to help us understand graphically and through this research how one can actually go about this. What is that economic picture?
Mm-hmm.
Diagram that. That might be a very interesting and somewhat distressing picture. And ultimately,
reality,
right? And ultimately, if the rec is to spend only 30% of your adjusted gross income on homes, then what do we have to design? And I guess implicitly, Mariah, that's why I was interested in having you guys think about smaller units,
mm-hmm.
because, and I think you did that very, very well, because, if these things are costing $1.25 or $1, $150 a square foot to build, right? So, people won't afford them. So this is a very interesting picture. I think you trying to understand this just statistically could be a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, because you don't want to design something that just automatically takes the majority of the people in Detroit in general out of the market.
Or you don't want to design something that's just a place where Tracy and I can afford to move to,
mm-hmm.
right? Because we're kind of past the sort of cycle or age of long-term meaningful sort of output
mm-hmm.
of like work and commitment and engagement with the city. We're at the end of that process in our lives, so not at the end, but we're sort of closer to that than say you are. You're trying to create opportunities for new people or people that are underserved by this market who maybe don't have as much capital to move in. And so how do you create an opportunity for them?
Yep. That's what I was I really wanted to keep that in the back of my head and not design 2,000 square foot apartments that only the elite could afford.
Right. I think it's also, useful for you to think about these things in light of just, I guess I'd say, thinking about it in terms of who would live here, even though you don't know who would live here, but thinking about who would live here because of like institutions like the Henry Ford Health Systems Hospital a mile and a half west of here, or the Poletown plant in Hamtramck, which is a GM automotive plant, which is a major employer, trying to tap into and impress us all with your knowledge of Detroit, even though you don't live here, like trying to understand that community and maybe, who works in these places, what is their pay, like try to like know a little bit more about us by getting educated on those things, and trying to target maybe one of those user groups, like people at the Henry Ford Health Systems. Where do they live? They don't want to live in Royal Oak and drive down there every day. They got shitty hours, right? They work 12 hours and then they're off for 3 days, or they work for 36 straight hours and then they're off for 3 or 4 days, right? So they don't want to drive home after a double or a triple.
No,
right?
and it's not
They
safe
want to be
either.
able to almost walk home. So think sort of imagine who you might be designing for, maybe by virtue of local employers. It doesn't have to be just within a mile either. It could be in Tech Town. It could be downtown. It could be Quicken Loans. It could be GM at the headquarters in the Renaissance Center. It could be any number of scenarios. Again, because we can benefit from the arrival of the M1 rail. I guess what I'm trying to get you and everyone to start thinking about is that that design is not a linear thing. First, I'm going to do the site plan, then I'm going to do the floor plan, then I'm going to do the ceiling plan, then I'm going to do the elevations, right? And I'm going to finish those drawings before I move on to that next thing. That architecture does not today operate that way. Architecture is like, do you have a bunch of sisters and brothers?
Nope. I'm an only child.
Only child. So this metaphor is hollow. So you know people that do.
Yes.
Okay. So imagine all of those sisters or brothers or both standing around the gravy pot at Thanksgiving dinner, and each of them simultaneously is adding stuff to the stock. To make that gravy, right? And it's happening at different times. It's happening with different things. It's happening with different quantities. That it's this sort of lagniappe of all of these things happening simultaneously. Architecture operates that way today. It's very, very much about all of these things happening contemporary to one another. So thinking about lots of things simultaneously is sort of the way you have to approach these projects.
Yeah, I have to wrap my head around that, because the last major project I did at work was a Marriott hotel. So it was very stringent upon what needed to be done for corporate, and things were done in the precise manner. So
yeah, because you were building a set of documents that aligned with their standards, right?
Yeah.
And you were judged on that. This is not like that because you don't have the knowledge that Marriott has of their own facilities and of their users. You're trying to learn all of that.
Great.
Okay.
Understandable.
Cool. Anything else?
I think that's it. I feel good. I was feeling a little lost today, but I feel good now.
No, I think you're in good shape. Just keep all of those sort of tennis balls in the air.
Gotcha.
Right?
I'll attempt to juggle.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank
Talk to you soon.
All right, I think I'm next, Mark.
Okay, go ahead, Nate.
So I guess I did a little site investigation, just kind of looking at what could possibly make sense on the site.
Good. Got it.
So, kind of looking at this block here, what, if this were to be developed, what type of unit, from the missing middle would we be looking at? So infill between the existing houses. At first, I was I missed the start of the conversation with Mariah. Was that she was looking at removing the homes, or?
She was talking about maybe demolishing homes that, in her estimation, were predictably more expensive to remedy and repair and renovate than if you were to sort of tear them down and start fresh and start new.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I kind of had the same thought that she did. That these homes and this one, a couple of them look livable. So, or that people are living in them. Actually, one as you walk through the street view, there's a stroller in front of the house. So, but yeah, kind of looking at what's this infill, because now I changed my mind, and if we do keep these homes, what belongs in this area, and then also looking at what could span across the alleyway.
Right.
And then also, I feel like this one starts to bring in some of the community aspect as kind of a courtyard or an open space in front of it.
Nate, are you actually pointing to something? Because I'm not picking that up.
Oh, you can't see it?
No, I'm
Kind of
sorry.
the green U shape.
Yes, I have that.
Okay, so just kind of how that is formed around and creates an open area in front of it. And then the only problem with that is there's like a 3-unit. Looks like it was 3 different additions built on to create an apartment or triplex.
Yeah, that building on Brush is anomalous. It's kind of an unusual condition. It faces Brush.
Mm-hmm.
It sits on the alley. It's like 4 apartments, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of implies that maybe there would have been another building up there against Smith that's just like it. Mm-hmm. And it implies that there could have been more buildings like it moving south along Brush. But if you look at the website that I was, maybe Mariah can share that website, the Detroit Loveland.
Yeah, I'm looking at
makeloveland.com.
Yep.
If you go to that, and if you look at your parcels, I think you've got some odd lots there.
Yeah, that corner is really odd.
Yeah, meaning it's not buildable because it's too small.
Right, and there's it's split up into 5 different lots right on the corner of Brush and Smith.
I think I remember that because I think someone else looked at that last semester.
Yeah.
So trying to understand this drawing, this sort of proposed infill, this site strategy, like we were talking with Mariah about, is a good thing to do. And thank you. And the next step would be to see how that aligns with lot ownership, and then compare. Let that begin to influence things, and then let existing trees that maybe are worth keeping, if that's possible to know, or existing alleys, can they be repaired, and should they be, and if so, what does that mean for building over it or building up to it, right? Like you're sort of targeting to do here in the Green C, for example. So all of those things I think you're looking at are sort of a positive thing. What I was saying to Mariah was, I was jumping all over her about this. What I was saying to Mariah was, be very mindful about how you kind of just wave your hand, let's just say, and suggest, I'm going to tear these down because they're old, or they're dilapidated, or they aren't as nice as, or they're empty. Whatever the summary is, whatever you say, it's going to sound pejorative and negative. You have to be very careful about that. You have to be very mindful that you're going to have tree huggers in the audience, and that, by that I mean they're going to be people that believe that all buildings in Detroit should be saved at whatever cost, and you'll never convince them otherwise, because Detroit has this notorious history of taking down everything, and it's a poor behavior. It is the defining trait of our city and the people in our city. We don't value architecture, and it happens at the high level, from the mayor all the way down. Not the current mayor, but the previous mayor, the one in Ale, for example, right? He tore down an historic hotel right near my office, right next to the Car Center, a beautiful building, so that he could make way for the Super Bowl, so that his friends could have a parking lot and they could make money off of cars parking there for the fucking Super Bowl.
Right.
And that sort of myopia, that tunnel vision, is that kind of typical thinking that we approached land development and real estate with in Detroit.
Yeah.
You've probably even heard that story.
Well, I think, is that the triangular site that, what park is down there?
Well, that's where my office is, actually. I'm on Harmony Park.
Okay.
And the triangular building is the Car Center and the Ashley Hotel. And then there's an alley there. And then there's actually a rectangular lot that had the hotel. I think it was the Statler Hotel. And it faces the DAC, the Detroit Athletic Club, and Madison Avenue, a beautiful boulevard. And they tore that building down overnight. And the preservationists were like, what the, they got there in the morning, there's a big pile with dust smoldering out of it. And that's what we do very, very efficiently here.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get people that are resistant to that. So, what I'm trying to get you to do is just be mindful of that and be careful about how you sort of upload your idea about dispatching buildings on the site.
Right.
And you have to kind of make the case for that. If it was an historic structure and it had a roof and walls, you would have to save it.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to. So saving them at all costs is probably a way to look at it. And maybe it's just the way that you approach everything in this studio, and then say that, well, I can't really predict exactly what it would cost to renovate this, but it will take definite, serious capital to do that. But it's worth doing that because we're preserving history, patina, the narrative of Detroit, and on and on and on and on and on. And you kind of dodge that bullet.
Right. Okay.
You've got a very interesting site because of those wonky odd lots, the alley, Brush Street, and the anomalous apartment building that faces Brush Street.
Right.
And then you've got the Muffy just south of it, and
Correct.
Bennett Park to the east of you.
Yep.
It's an awesome site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was looking at trying to extend, kind of Bennett Park throughout and make that extension into the alleyway, and how, people get from John R. down the alley to Bennett Park, and what that would be like for an occupant. And I guess my first, when I was first looking at a couple weeks ago, I was kind of looking at more of a retail, how does retail play into this area, which I could see developing more up on John R. and Smith on that corner, making a hard corner. But then as you move down the block, it can become more residential. But I end up with, single family homes that are scattered in between now. So by respecting them, they break up kind of the initial idea I had. So I'm opening up maps on a different screen. I'm listening to you. I'm just okay.
going somewhere else right now.
So I don't know if my site is still too big.
It might be a little big. We can dial that in.
Right.
Let's talk about your instinct though.
Yeah, that's where I kind of, when I was first looking at retail, staying to the west. But now I feel like moving to the east, kind of the east half of that block, seems like the right location to be, kind of where the green U shape was, or C shape.
So I'm going to look at that first house on Smith. I think the first house on Smith in your block,
coming from John R.
Coming from Brush.
From Brush, okay.
Let me look at the facade of that because I know that house. Oh shoot, the map is moving. It's the pink house, the pink roof.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the one with the porch that's gone.
The one in the middle is very interesting.
What's that?
The one in the middle. Between
Yeah, the one in the middle's been kind of like
they
took an X-Acto knife to it and they just sort of sliced it right. in the sort of parallel direction of Smith Street. So like for me, Nate, I'd probably like sit there with my arms folded about the idea of like saving those other two parcels. But the one that is closest to you, the one with no porch and the roof of the porch that's caved in, that's actually a nice house.
Yeah.
It's got great proportions. I love the windows. I love the dormer. It's got a nice chimney. It's masonry. And it deserves that kind of infill. And I think that, and it would be, in other words, I think it deserves to be restored in the way that it was, with maybe the possibility of leaving it at that, or maybe adding something to the east or the rear or both.
Right.
But I do think that you could make the case with me pretty easily. And those two other houses are still there. There's actually someone living in that western house.
Yep.
I think you could make the case that you could tear those down to the first floor deck and let the existing foundations be the basis of whatever you do that's new on them. Right. And, those are a little bit smaller than the one to the left, the brick one. But I think, you could propose new construction there so that you're not throwing everything out the door. Right. So I guess where I'm going, Nathan, is that you would maybe want to take those three houses. And then I'm going to look at Bethune now. Are those three houses still there? Because when I look at the aerial, it looks like one of them's gone. Can you verify, staying on Smith Street, can you verify that there are three houses there from our current site visit? Because the aerial only shows two. The aerial right now shows that the middle house, the one that's been X-Actoed, is gone, and I think it might be.
Oh yeah, yep. It looks like it's recent because there's
still a pile there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that is gone. So,
okay.
So it might be interesting to not do the whole block, Bethune to Smith, from John R. to Brush. Might be interesting for you to look at where, like, the northern boundary is Smith. The western boundary is the demolition line of that middle house. And it runs south through the trees in the alley, right, and picks up a vacant lot on Bethune, and then runs east to the odd lot at the corner, and then runs north to grab the existing apartment building, right, and the lot next to that. That's kind of like the lot size that Mariah and I were just looking at for her. It's more manageable,
yep.
And it's still relational to Bennett Park. It's relational to Brush, and you're actually a little bit closer, right, to the M1 than she was. But I think you both have the challenge of relating somehow to Brush Park, but also relating to other streets. And I think that's what's interesting about your site.
Mm-hmm.
And then you heard me talking with her about like looking at what's there, understanding who owns those lots, how large they are, what the dimensions are, and then doing a diagram that records that research. And then trying to understand, how many units per acre exist there today. And it's going to be a low number.
Right.
And then trying to understand what, in terms of like the missing middle research is telling us, what should we be doing for density as a number that's going to like help generate revenue for the cost of the land. So that, because like single family homes aren't necessarily going to create that revenue stream that a higher density scenario would be. So Mariah and I were talking tonight to a very large extent about that.
Yeah. So is that where you start to go from kind of your duplex?
Yep.
You kind of pick between,
Yep.
or, are you going to build a duplex or are you going to build a multiplex?
Yeah, exactly. Then Mariah, that's the stuff I'm talking about in terms of understanding the typologies within missing middle. And Nathan, you can say, okay, this is concept A showing, right, these typologies on my site. And this is the units per acre that I can achieve. Here's concept B, and here's concept C. But within the housing typologies of missing middle is the larger question about being tactical, right? About where certain typologies go relational to what we know about urban form. Like, we want the nicer units and the taller buildings on the corner, because corners are corners. Corners generate more revenue, right? If I have a house on the corner, as I do, I have, in effect, right, two front facades. I have a side yard facade, right, that's facing a street that's got maybe it has a necktie and a coat, but it's kind of a loosened necktie, right?
Yep.
But the front facade is a coat and tie, and it's tied tightly because it's got to be like there, right? So corner lots have what I would call A facades. Like, I grade facades. When I look at sites, I think of like the quality of them relational to like a letter grade. And that also translates to like the fenestration, the proportion of fenestration and the quality of the materials and the number of units, right? And the cost of those units. So just like a cow, right, gets cut up into beef, right? High on the hog or high on the cow is, where that phrase comes from, right? High on the hog is the best meat, right? And so, you're talking about prime cut for those corner lots. Infill lots are going to be like a B+ B grade. And the backs of any facades might be C grades. So thinking about the way to approach a site just from like the grading metric or the grading rubric might be an interesting approach to deploying the missing middle typologies. I think the ordinance is also going to sort of like suggest what kind of building height and density we can get. And that may create some restrictions in the concept plans that you come up with. And here's the other thing, the Brush Park facade that has to relate to the park, right? That may adjust the grading. That may make it so that you have A+ facades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think of, like, we were just talking about Bath a minute ago in England, right? John Wood, or John Adam, rather. John Wood? I can't remember now. Oh, God. Brain fart. I've been there, right? The Royal Crescent, which faces that large green, right? That's a continuous facade, a continuous kind of colonnade of stacked apartments, a beautiful, stridently repetitious, almost monotonous facade, but a beautiful facade nonetheless that faces the green because it had to deal with that park. So, that's another thing to consider.
Okay, so kind of looking at both quality of materials and I guess aesthetically looking at the design, like you said, the fenestrations and how, but do that purposely, whether it's an infill or whether it's a corner, whether it's a standalone. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
We talked a little with Tyson the other day about how Bennett Park was thinking of expanding. I don't think that that's going to get any traction, but maybe part of what you try to do is think about the alley as an opportunity for, like greening the alley, making it a viable, safe, designed pedestrian and vehicular experience that gets us from Woodward or from the west through to your site and has Bennett Park as kind of its terminating vista. I don't know that has merit, but I would definitely look at that option.
Yeah, well. I like that idea. It's kind of strange because I was thinking about this earlier, how Bennett Park is, it looks, from here, it looks like it's half of it's for younger, like children. Is that?
Yeah, so in the upper left, it's the play area, right? The northwest corner with the dirt is the play area with like kids, like tykes, and kindergartners and first graders. It has play equipment for that. And then the southwest, you see like shuffleboard, bocce ball courts.
Okay.
See those 3 courts there?
Yep.
Or ring toss, that kind of thing. Then there's a picnic pavilion where it says Bennett Park on Google Maps.
Yep.
And then there's the basketball court, which gets, I gotta say, some pretty serious play there. And there's also a curb cut, so people actually pull their cars onto the park and then park and then get out and they start playing hoop.
Okay.
I saw kids on Saturday that were probably like 12 or 14 years old. They were probably 10 and they just looked that age, right? They looked older, but they were playing some serious basketball on that court. The green area to the southeast is kind of just, was not a program space. So, I'm not sure, how, it could be like soccer or tyke soccer, tyke frisbee, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm sitting here thinking, all right, we're looking at housing for millennials or younger generations that aren't having children, and then we're also possibly looking at older generations that are beyond those ages, and kind of centered around. But also to the east, we have the single family homes that can support families. So then looking to the west. Or is that more north? To the east, you still have the more dense single-family home houses. So,
we were talking earlier with Mariah as well about thinking about who that end user might be and trying to sort of dial in on that, trying to understand, what the heck a millennial is, and learning more about them and learning more about what their prerogatives or choices and preferences are, and that can get a little hairy. I'm always a little uncomfortable about trying to understand a user group by defining them with a name like millennials or Gen Xers or whatever. That's always like, in an effort to be inclusive, it ends up being kind of profiling, and I don't want to get into that territory. But like when we were talking earlier tonight, the idea of maybe assuming who might be a major employer and understanding about who they've hired and what the workforce is like, and what do they earn, and what do they make, and are they single, are they married? Understanding a workforce employer in terms of what they are doing as like being an attractor of people to move closer to work so they can walk to work, or take the M1 to work, or ride their bike to work. And if you could define a little bit more about them, then you could like suggest that you're designing for their employees, right? I have a client that's doing work on West Grand Boulevard, west of even the Motown Museum and west of the Henry Ford Health Systems. She's been talking with Henry Ford, and Henry Ford is telling her, if you build it, I'll fill it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and then I guess going down into the scale of the units themselves, looking at that, as small as we can get. You brought up a good point when I was listening in on Anna's conversation on Monday about kind of looking into like an RV or travel trailer type setup. I think that came up. It's interesting because we're going to be camping this weekend, so shopping for a travel trailer, which we just did, and switching models and things like that. But it's amazing the efficiency that you can get out of something like that and how livable it is.
I'm going to tell you something. I think we all watch TV, and they have a phrase for guilty pleasure, right? That like guilty pleasure might be me watching Gilligan's Island, or some goofy like show that I might have watched before. My guilty pleasure is to watch this show called Tiny House Nation or something like that. And it's like this short show that shows, you and your family, right? Maybe not able to like afford the house that you've been living in, and you jump in and say, I'm going to join this community of tiny house livers and dwellers, and I'm going to let them design me a house on wheels, and it's going to be 248 square feet. And suddenly like that restriction and the height, because it's got to fit under the roadways and the bridges, right, with wheels and inflated, all of that stuff everything becomes like super, super important. I love so the guilty pleasure for me of watching that show is watching the family take in just how little space they're going to have when they like first visit the chassis. The kitchen's over here and the living room's over here, and the wrist doesn't move very far because there's not a lot of room. Right? Yeah. You can like turn like that and see all of the unit. They're all standing there inevitably. They're all standing there they're just like, what? How are we all gonna? They got like a big dog. The dad's like 6'4". The wife's like 5'1", and they've got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I'm like, oh my God, how is this gonna work? And then they go. But the interesting thing is how they start to get rid of and offload things. How like when you're gonna pack for camping this weekend, it's going to take cold weather gear and rain gear, and you're going to take only what you need. And if you need something, you can go buy it, right? So the idea is that you profile things that are essential. And then you start to think about things that can have double and triple functions, like a bed can be a couch, right? And it can flip over and lift up and become a storage component, right? The bathroom can be a toilet with a sink, but it can also be a shower, like on a jet. Like a room that big can have all three of those activities. Right. A cooktop can be not on the countertop, but drop down, right, and come into play. And then hinge back up out of play so that the cooktop can be used when you're not cooking, but when you're prepping. And you know what I mean? So you're always thinking about, and the bed dropping down on pulleys and weights, like an old time fire door in my office, for instance, where if you're going to open the fire door, you pull it open, but you're pulling it open against the weights because the weights are going to want to close the door again, right?
Right.
So that kind of convertibility, that kind of multi-functioning approach to designing things like, everything really in the unit is really interesting. That's the stuff that jacks the cost of these units up, but it's also the mitigating factor for the reduced amount of square footage.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is thinking about storage and how to tuck things away. Because it's like where I live, our house is 1,100 square feet, and I never feel like I have enough storage.
I'm sure.
But, it's like how can you limit that? I guess I need to quit some activities or something so that, so I don't know how people can live in a 400 square foot house, but, so yeah, I guess getting into, who's going to live in these units and their lifestyle and
right.
How they're, and I think that starts to develop a bigger site too, and having amenities not within the units, but more community type.
Spot on. So that's where I was going to take this next. So, how many children do you have?
One.
So you have one, maybe you have another one in a few years, and the 1,100 square feet today feels like even less than, right? So maybe in anticipating families like yours, Nate, maybe the living rooms or the backyards and the things that happen in those spaces, or the kitchen itself, is maybe you think harder about what that could really be like. Maybe 1,100 square feet is all you need to live in, right? In terms of sleeping and studying and bathing and those like super private things. But then maybe kitchens can be like shared between 2 or 3 other families. Maybe living rooms and the fireplace, right, can be shared. So kind of like social or cooperative housing, and trying to understand what Missing Middle is encouraging in that vein is another sort of way to sort of explore that. And then, you're an architect, and you have architecture books and supplies and computers, and you need space and place to do the architecture to support your family along with your spouse. But maybe like if you could live above the shop, right, to live above the studio, you could move some of that stuff that you have in your house into that worker space on the ground floor that is part of a much larger economic model where you're paying rent in your own building, your company is paying rent in your own building, right? And so you can like offload some of that stuff and make it happen to sort of go to the office. So thinking about the retail viability of some of these things, and thinking about like entrepreneurship, that maybe some of the people that you're attracting there are not just like generally speaking millennials or hospital workers or GM workers, but maybe thinking of them as, participants of the new economy, and, makers like artisans, architects, photographers, and civil engineers and landscape architects and whatever your generation, IT and software designers and all of that stuff, app designers, maybe that's where they want to be, and because they don't really need a big place, right? And they maybe through your research you discover that there's a whole segment of people that are your age that are really into that idea of social or shared living. So maybe trying to understand that a little bit more. Maybe that's a way to approach the user group.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was talking to one of our principals today about this project, and that's what he brought up. Is he's like, well, because I was kind of going over the floor plans and stuff, and he was looking at it, and he's like, well, you're kind of missing a den or a working area, because if you do have an entrepreneurial type person, where are they going to work? Or,
right.
So by providing that space within the floor plan. So yeah, we had that conversation today. So
another user group is, and looking at those existing houses, if all of them were there, is to say, okay, I'm using my family, and as a typical, I'm assuming that I am typical and that I'm repeatable and duplicatable, and that I'm like everyone, and I'm the type of family that wants to move to Detroit. But I also know that my mother-in-law is getting on, and so I'm going to design the unit that actually accommodates an extended family, right? Mm-hmm. And so that could be a very interesting assumption. Ultimately, in a studio like this, we're going to have assumptions to make. The point is to sort of state those assumptions and then react to them, and that's where you'll be most efficient.
Yeah. Okay.
So I like the idea of maybe reducing the footprint of the site. I think it makes dealing with existing things a little bit easier, because there's fewer of them, fewer decisions and assumptions that you would need to make.
Yep.
I also think that the challenge of dealing with that existing Brush Street building and Dolores Bennett Park, blended with the wonky ass geometries and lot sizes of the so-called odd lots, could be very interesting. And understanding what you could actually do there, that bit of research could be very interesting, because some of those lots are not buildable. And then applying the sort of missing middle. That's what I've always appreciated about you, Nate, is you're trying to understand that missing middle as a kind of a matrix of like housing typologies here. You're getting that, and I want to encourage you to stay there and look at that. All right.
Yep. Yeah.
What else?
I guess moving forward with our presentation for the research pieces,
yes,
which we had scheduled for October, was it 8th? th 24th.
24th, I thought.
Yep, October 24th. Now, was this, we're kind of together as a team and pulling pieces of, our own focused research and creating a linear presentation of that research?
Well, I don't know how you want to do it. The way we've done it before was sort of like this. There was a team on the site and the history of the community, and there was a team on the zoning of Detroit, the current zoning of Detroit, which is a very complicated thing, and the Detroit future city and how that framework applies to this neighborhood. Then there was a third team that dealt with missing middle housing and the themes of it, and kind of explain that stuff. Each team was comprised of 2 or 3 people, and within each team, the 2 or 3 people had specific things that they owned, that they would become the de facto expert on, right? So you might be the de facto expert on Detroit zoning. Mm-hmm. And your goal and your grade right? Your grade is on how quickly and easily it was for you to transfer all of your expertise in your 3-minute, 5-minute presentation to everyone in the class, right, so that they are experts, just like you. All from what you sort of graphically show and what you said. And then, so think of, so that's and each of you will present. One team, you know, the 2 or 3 people of one team will present. Then we move on to the next team, and the 1 or 2 people there will present. And then the next team, 2 or 3 people will present there, right? Kind of, and I do this a lot in other ways. I had a seminar class, and, you know, we all, you know, we had to read this book. You know, I was one of those teachers. You have to read this book. It's an important book. I don't want you to graduate without reading the book. And so instead of assuming that you were going to be able to write about the book or talk about the whole book, because I knew you would never read the whole book, I said, Nathan, you're reading chapter 1. Mariah's reading chapter 2. Judd's reading chapter 3. Thomas is reading chapter 4. And each of you present a small presentation on that chapter, right? You're the expert on the chapter, and you'll listen to the other experts on the other 7 chapters, right? And then at the end of it all, you're kind of like, whoa, now I'm seeing, right? In my mind, I'm kind of like letting the gears sink and run together. Now I'm seeing what I was reading is really part of a much larger, much more complicated, and actually interesting premise. And it lets you know the book a little bit better. And ultimately, I think in every case, the kids went back that summer and said, you know, I read that book. It's actually really good. And I really like how we read it that way. You kind of became an expert on one thing and shared your expertise with other people in the studio. And together you kind of assembled it.
Okay.
Kind of like Cubist painting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the goal. And on the 24th, all of you will present the research first. Then we'll stop and then run through each of the presentations.
Okay.
And by the way, that's kind of tough to do, right? So as we run to a close, so let's say we start at 5:30 to 9, so that's 4 hours. 4 times 60 is 240, and let's say you back out, gosh, 20 minutes just for the research. That's 220 divided by 8. That's 28 minutes per person, right? That's plenty, right? So that's how that works, right?
Okay.
Or it's probably more like 20 minutes with a break and some computer snafus or whatever, right? Or you run long on the research presentation. So that's why we do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Was that clearer?
At least it's not like, at least it's not like Dan Patera. I don't know if you know Dan.
I know Dan very well.
He used to, our crits were, he had his 8 timer. That was set to 3 minutes.
I have the Quack. Have you ever heard the Quack?
Yep.
It's ridiculous and everybody hates it, but I use that. So, I don't know if I can do it. It's the duck, but yeah, it's just a quack, quack, quack. And I turn it up so everyone hears it. And yeah, Dan got it. Dan got the timer from the same kitchen store I got mine from. And I go, hey, I got that. But I use my phone, Dan. He's like, oh, yeah, that's actually a good idea. So, and then you can have funny sounds. So, yeah, but I do time you.
Okay.
And I am kind of militant about that because I need to stay on schedule because we'll never finish otherwise. That's the one reason we do it. But here's another reason, and I talk about this a lot throughout the semester. You're going to run into zoning officials who kind of say right in the middle of point that, well, we need to move on. So Mr. Architect, you're all done. And you're like, and zoning officials or church boards or synagogue boards or facilities team managers will literally cut you off at the knees in your presentation. So you need to understand how important it is to get your points out efficiently, clearly, and it causes you to need to think about what you're going to say and when you say it, right?
Yep.
Your presentation is not a murder mystery where you find out who murdered someone at the very end of the movie, because when I cut you off at the 18-minute mark or the 8-minute mark and you still have to get to the last chapter, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, like showing the murder at the beginning of the show might be the way to think about how you unpack your story.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I need to move on. Anything else, though?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, who's next?
I think I am. I think I was scheduled to go next.
Go ahead. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. So you've been following, right?
I have, yeah. I think Nate and I actually have a lot about ours right now that are kind of in common with each other.
Sure.
So I started looking at the site selection and kind of narrowing it down more and more from Monday. And I got to looking at that, the Loveland Detroit site.
Yeah.
And I was looking at all the red rectangles here are parcels that are owned or part or under ownership by the Detroit Land Bank.
Right.
So I was almost thinking about narrowing down to the parcels that are, I guess, publicly owned or not necessarily privately owned by a resident,
Mm-hmm.
but still being able to renovate some of the houses that are existing on those Detroit Land Bank property.
But are there that many, though, Zach?
There's a couple. There's two down at the very south.
I mean, the lot with the lot on Smith with the two red bars, that's all vacant.
Right, and so that one I was just thinking about leaving alone in general.
Not working on it.
Correct. So that was just kind of calling out what was actually owned by the land bank there.
Yeah.
I guess my concerns are if I get too big of a site or too big of an area to try and work with.
Yeah.
Trying to balance large enough with small enough.
You know what? I'm looking at your map here, Zach, and you're showing the house on Smith Street that we were hoping was still in play because it's the nicest one as missing. So you guys who are looking at these sites, particularly Nate, you need to verify with the current photographic survey that the houses are there.
Is that
You see what I'm saying?
Right here.
Well, your cursor is not.
It would be just to the left of the middle red rectangle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this aerial photo shows it gone, but that Loveland website shows houses there.
Yeah, I think the aerial photo is going to be more accurate.
Okay.
Right? Well, because websites are human input, right?
Right.
So Mariah is giving a shout out. Is ownership of the land bank for a property a bad thing? The city of Detroit owns probably 83% of the land in the city of Detroit. And that's a result of foreclosures and the like. And the problem with that, of course, as you can imagine, is that no one is paying taxes, right, to the city on those properties, because the city ain't going to pay the city for that because they're not generating, right? It's a conundrum. So the city is in the real estate business, and they shouldn't be, right? Because that's not a logical scenario.
Right.
But the land bank, and the land bank is, right, the bank that owns those notes, and they're going to offload them and sell them back like bonds are sold, so that the properties can be redeemed and become productive.
Mm-hmm.
So a land bank is going to sell an existing home to someone like me, Mariah, under strict terms. And that is that I'm going to buy the home for like $30,000 or $18,000, but I have like 6 months to bring it up to code. So there's the hook. You have to act quick, and you have to have all your ducks in a row when you do this. And so the land bank is trying to maximize the rehabilitation of property by being strategic about what properties are available and when. And they usually come up in auction, right? Because an auction is going to achieve the best value for the property. And you then are tied to a contract with the land bank to repair that property, historic or otherwise, within a certain period of time. Historic properties are a little bit longer, and properties that are not historic are about 6 months. So you have to wait for the lot to come up that you're targeting. You have to act quickly on your due diligence period, because it's very short. You have to have a contractor in your back pocket, and in your other pocket, you have to have a lot of $100 bills, because you have to start the work right away. And otherwise, the property's taken back. So if you look at the Detroit Land Bank website, you'll learn a little bit about how that process plays out and what that means. So is it a good thing? I guess it depends. Would I buy a house from the land bank? There are houses that are like ready to go that don't need repair, and those are going to cost more. And that's probably what, if I were doing something, I would probably do it that way, because I don't have the time or the resources to go about renovating something. If I was someone like you, Mariah, or someone like you, Zach, who might be young and wasn't necessarily, working in an office maybe, but was making money in other ways, because you were like a contractor, for example, then you would buy that house and act on it straight away, making good on the minimal improvements to make the house habitable.
Right.
And then you could roll it. Then you could sell it, to someone else. I would probably buy something from a homeowner, because I think that path would be a lot easier for me, and that's kind of what I'm more familiar with. But this is the currency in Detroit right now: the land bank, the auction, and the sort of requirements for both of those.
So do you know how often houses are actually being renovated right after being bought out of these land banks?
They have to be.
Is it something that people are actively doing, though, or is there still a lot that just isn't being?
Well, a lot of properties do return to the land bank. I'll just say that, because there's other issues, right? Which is like contractors saying, I'm not working down there.
Right.
Right. I'm going to get ripped off. Or the cost of doing business in Detroit in a building is expensive, because you got to secure the site. And it's really, there's like these chronic problems that plague the city, and it's just going to take a lot more cooperation from a lot of people to make these improvements happen. The land bank is also holding on to all of these lots, Tyson will tell us, because they want to jack the prices of these up once the M1 comes online. So these lots will probably go to a developer,
Right.
and they'll join them, and they'll do something like you're doing, which is generating a much higher unit per acre scenario with new product that promotes gentrification, right? The improvement of the class or the status or the quality or all of the above of this neighborhood by building on these vacant lots.
Right. Interesting.
So dealing with the things that are existing there, particularly along Bethune and Brush, I think is a good idea. You may find that you may find that the challenge, you may find that challenge of working with the existing things a lot of fun. You know, you may find it a headache. I don't know personally how you sit on that fence, but what's your sense? Are you the kind of person that likes to clean slate and wants to do all new, or are you the kind of person that likes to solve problems and roll up your sleeves and deal with these challenges of things that are there already?
Well, I like the idea of trying to use what's there, bringing it back to what it was and what it could be. Kind of like Mariah said, though, too, there's the balancing point of what it would actually cost to do that, and if
Right.
is it economically feasible or smart at that point to do that.
Right.
So I guess it would take looking into what those structures are and just kind of trying to judge from photos and sitting back what the feasibility of it would be.
So then for me, Zach, I think the lot or lots that you need to be looking at are the ones on Bethune and Brush and Smith, right?
Right. Yeah, because I was kind of thinking too of leaving that the vacant area there as what could be an extension of Bennett Playground, developing that over as or more of another type of community space. So
That's interesting. I'm looking at a different map that's, I think your map is kind of like March or April, and I'm looking at, obviously my map right now on Google Earth is July, because it's a lot greener.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if you go back to your map for a second, I think maybe if you're interested in the conversation about the expansion of Bennett Park, then I might take the western property line in red
Mm-hmm.
of the Bennett Park block and extend that line north to Smith Street and grab that whole square.
Okay, so let me know.
Well, again, your cursor doesn't line up with it, but
Yeah.
you know, on Bethune, you've got the two houses in your red box.
Yep.
Take that red box and slide it up to Smith Street,
Okay.
and then
Right.
make one big box out of those two equally sized boxes, and that would be your boundary. Because then you're able to deal with the vacant lots on Smith and Bethune, the existing buildings in those areas, and the parcel on the piece on Brush Street, and then you can keep open the corner lot for the Bethune and Brush.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. That would seem to make sense.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure if you've got that site open that shows the individual lots and their dimensions, but it's probably 5 lots wide on Smith or on Bethune. So it's probably like 5 times 40 feet.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, so it's like 200 by 200. That's sort of the size of your lot.
Right.
That's almost an acre. I think an acre, more or less, an acre and a half, somewhere in there, maybe nothing less than an acre, is probably worth your attention, worth your time. So if you're less than an acre, Zach, maybe you move a little bit further west and grab some more land.
Okay.
It's interesting. There's two houses on Bethune. On my map, it's where the text says Bethune. So it's running from Brush to John R. on Bethune. You have the vacant land, the two houses, the gap lot, and then the bigger house, right? It's the one right in the middle of the lot, right in the middle of the block.
Mm-hmm.
In that vacant piece of land, actually, no, I'm sorry. It's between the third and the fourth house in that block, running from Brush to John R. Those families actually have pop-up tents in the driveway. And they've got people living in the tents outside. I think I don't know if I showed a picture. I don't know if I shot a picture of that last. I don't have my camera with me. I don't know if I shot a picture of that or not last week, but I'm sure somebody else grabbed it. You ought to take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just scroll through and find it. Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of the Wild West over here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that comes through, but it's a sturdy neighborhood, and it's definitely committed, and it has its issues, it has its problems, and I imagine I imagine that the land bank has their eyes on making some capital, although that would be totally unfounded in saying it that way, but they'd be they could stand to make a lot of money on some of these lots once the M1 comes online. No one like me or you are going to be able to buy property there next year.
Right.
Whatever the land values are today, they're going to double, triple. It'll be like the California gold rush over there.
That's kind of crazy when you just go through and look at like the Google Maps Street View stuff of that area, that you wouldn't think that would be the case.
Right. So we've talked a little bit in the other conversations tonight, about units per acre, about missing middle housing, ultimately as a way of prompting you to start looking at, along with all the other things that you're doing, start looking at what, again, if we were working together in an office, what you would start drawing as a figure ground, right, for architecture on this 1 acre piece of land, and trying to understand the deployment of new architecture, new physical buildings and spaces around those buildings in order to promote density, and to promote the sort of connectivity to the M1, to the larger community, in your case to Bennett Park, and so on. And thinking about your unit that you drew the other day, can you screen share that tonight once again? Is that possible?
Give me just a minute to find it.
as you're digging that up, I'm suggesting that maybe you start thinking of the unit that you've designed as kind of a component that gets arrayed and configured. Right, I remember now. So thinking about this as a series of 1 and 2 bedroom sort of opportunities for the site, arraying, flipping and flopping, that sort of thing, turning corners, and thinking of this as kind of adding more of this to this neighborhood. And ultimately, I think you'll find that as you're doing that, you're going to say, oh, wow, I need to be more conscious of how we get in and out of the buildings if I'm parking a car. I got to be more conscious of where the fronts are and what do I do on an end of one of these single occupant units, or what do I do when I don't have windows on the sides, kind of thing. All the things that you think about when you're drawing the unit, but now you start thinking about them as you apply them to the site plan.
Right, and that was kind of what I was looking at with further developing these is something I've kind of been interested in the whole time is like townhomes and then the laneway houses or alley homes.
Yeah, the alley homes are really interesting. So have you started to look at townhomes and laneway housing? Have you done any searches on that?
Yeah, and I found a couple case studies on the laneway houses. One was in Vancouver and one was in Austin, Texas.
I have another one for you.
Okay.
So type in laneway house, Shim Sutcliffe, and go to images.
All right, give me just a second.
Or I'll screen share it. How about that?
Okay.
Can you see that?
As soon as yep.
So this was an existing. This was an existing alley. Let's see if I can find some other shots of it. No, not this one. Not this one. Yeah, here's another shot of it, right? So it's an existing alley. This is an existing property, and the front door of it is on the alley, right? And the alley is clearly, typically like this, a garage with a driveway in front of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then what they've done with this laneway house, this firm Shim and Sutcliffe, is they've created a multi-level sort of housing typology. They created a new housing typology that actually sits on that alley. I don't know if I look at other examples, these sort of look more like this. Actually might be the other view of that, this white black and white image. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it is actually. It maybe just changes as you wrap it around, because I'm looking at this and you see the charred cedar facade here in black.
Right.
And then it goes to like rusting steel, which has kind of a syncopated quality. They have a tricky website. It's kind of hard to... I'm going there now. It's kind of like a film strip, and it's hard to navigate. It also is not opening. So maybe if you can go to that website, you can, for some reason it's not opening up for me. You can maybe learn more about that house from their own website. But the laneway housing is a real interesting type, and that's a type that we explored in our office, Zach, with the Brush Park stuff. And it's, I think, it raises some very interesting questions about using the alley as the front facade, using the alley as the front door, using the alley as a major sort of driveway or street for the development. It promotes the increase of units per acre, and ultimately, in my mind, the stuff at Brush Park, aside from the work we've designed there, because we're working with other architects, I think the alley pieces that Merge Architecture created is really the best stuff. So for me, that's really compelling stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was just kind of interesting, something that you don't see everywhere.
So let me show you another screen. I'm going to screen share another thing too. Why isn't there we go. So again, Toronto urban infill, existing laneway, right? See that?
Yep.
Or that. Here's another shot of the laneway house. And then my favorite, I had him in my jury last April. Here we go. Office of Jonathan Tate. So look at this. And here's that same parcel. See that?
Right, yeah.
Oh, I want to live here. I tell you what. So, and then you walk up those steps from the street and you walk down that wood pathway, and this is where, and then you turn around and look where you came from.
That is pretty cool. Narrow too.
Yeah, oh yeah, I mean, that's the point, right?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I started looking at after we spoke Monday about the floor plans, is more efficient uses of space. And like what Nate was saying, looking at those tiny homes and campers and RVs and things, and how they create the maximum amount of storage out of the least amount of space.
Yeah.
And kind of even using like the confines of even a shipping container as something to build within it, as opposed to adding multiple together, but that one container is the house itself, basically.
So yeah, the shipping container is a real interesting thing. I mean, it's definitely intriguing. We did a shipping container park for the Olympia team. You know, we're working on the arena, and we're doing all of the buildings around the arena in our office. And we were brought on over a year ago to help them on a quick project, which never ended up happening, but we got it all the way through schematic design. And we did a shipping container sort of park, retail park for them just north of Hockeytown, and on the vacant land at Hockeytown where they have their outdoor like beer garden.
Okay.
And so we created a beer garden, you know, really, right, out of shipping containers. And we configured them so they created kind of a cloister, right? No surprise. You can get a lot of mileage out of the cloister. If that's one thing you've learned this semester, it's the word cloister. And stacking them to get more vertical dimension and sense of compaction and space. And then cutting them open so that you can create counters and, you know, windows and stacking them like vertically to show them as maybe clock towers and pylons and branding opportunities. Have you ever been to Vegas?
I have not, no.
So container. Vegas. There's like a TV show called The Chew, and they have like a 4-minute segment on this place. Let me pull up a really cool image of it. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like 2 shipping containers there, and the windows are cut open, and then they create these flaps. This is sort of like a gesture, but looks like a bell tower there. This is like an elevator tower over here. Here's a hovering container, right? That's used for signage. Here's like the elevator tower there. And it's all outdoor decks and stairways, right? It's two stacked containers with like an infrastructure of columns and walkways, like a Red Roof Inn might have, right? But you get the idea. And then you look here on the lower left, down here where it says pork and beans, right? You see that there's like kitchens inside and ordering windows where that person's standing, then you can sit down and eat. So that's sort of what we created, something like that. There's another shot of it. We created something like that for, oh, here's a nice drawing of it.
Mm-hmm.
For the Illiches. They never ended up doing it, but that's okay. But I guess the thing that's interesting about the container is, again, that question of restriction, working within a unit, right? A really severe unit, and thinking about it as like a program that could have some predictable degree of occupancy and occupant load. Mm-hmm. And then if you needed to like have kids, then you would have to snap on another component. And so creating 2, or a larger family, still 3, right? Mm-hmm. And thinking about the project as a series of like incremental opportunities. That's sort of what's interesting about your own unit design. It has that sort of interchangeability. So like Legos are, right? Mm-hmm. And so the container is, I think, a metaphor for what I'm talking about, not necessarily an actual thing, although I wouldn't discourage you from doing shipping containers. They present their own challenges, and it might be an interesting challenge for you this semester to work through that. But the idea of thinking of a self-contained like residential pod mm-hmm. that could be built in a factory in Grand Rapids in a climate controlled environment, and then delivered right on the back of a flatbed within 300 miles, right? And then imagine then that flatbed, like the Lowe's truck that delivered my fencing yesterday, has a crane on it and can lift that thing off the bed and onto the site, and then the crew lifts that into place into an infrastructure that's, you know what I'm saying? Thinking about it as a process, and then creating a vignette of how that might play out. But thinking of designing the unit itself, programming it in such a way that you forecast its like production, delivery, erection, and then occupation, and thinking about it, you know, in that way, that could present an interesting sort of project for you.
Right.
So, you know, I'm pretty wide open with you guys about this stuff. It's within it's your obligation to come up with the rules of engagement. That's kind of hard for a lot of people.
Which is kind of
if I said,
different from
I'm going to do a project on housing with shipping containers. I would get a whole bunch of kids that signed up for this class because they've always wanted to do a shipping container project, right? There's a lot of things that you can be studying. The shipping container is just sort of a means to an end, in my opinion, right? It's a way of understanding a much larger conversation about process, about design, about repeatability, and about how this idea could transfer to your neighborhood where you are, Zach. That's the more important thing.
Right. And I think I've always been interested by that process of things and how they get from start to end. So it might be kind of interesting to look at that.
Sure. And then there's that whole conversation about I don't want to say motor homes, but like trailers and trailer parks. That has an awful stigma to it, but like pre-engineered factory-built housing, that could be a very interesting sort of thing. It doesn't have to be trailers. Like, it doesn't have to be something you pull on wheels and then put a skirt around it and grow flowers up against it when it does land, right, in a trailer park. It doesn't have to be like that. It could actually be something that's much more sublime and much more sort of interesting. That's what the architect brings to the conversation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's the pros that trailers have in the sense that there's a lot of them, like what we have now, or what we're trying to do, are smaller and efficient with space. Just that stigma of presentation and what they look like from the outside. That
right. Yeah, there's actually a container park, or not a park. There's actually a container project in Detroit. It's it is let me just take a quick drive up Trumbull. Trumbull is the drive that the Tiger Stadium was on.
okay, right.
Where is it? It's not this far. I must have passed it. Well, there's a project on Trumbull. It's a container house. It's a series of like 2 or 3 units, 3 stories, and the Loft Warehouse was representing it. So you could maybe find that on their website, or taking more time and just going down Trumbull here and looking at it. Maybe I'm going back south again in the hopes that we'll find it, and I'm not confident we will. No, I went the wrong way.
I'll have to Google it and see if I can't get a hold of it.
I actually, oh God, I can't tell where it is. Yeah, Google it on your own time. That's fine. And then Royal Oak has one on North Main Street, and a couple bought it in Royal Oak, and they bought it for like $400,000.
Holy cow.
It's like, whoa. That's like, good grief. That's a lot of capital.
Yeah, no kidding. On a shipping container that costs what, $2,000?
Exactly. So I guess that's the takeaway. Maybe not think of it so much as I want to do shipping containers as much as, you know, thinking about this as like unitized construction or pre-engineered construction, so that it creates an environment that's more efficient, more cost sort of controlled, more quality controlled, and beginning to understand the industry that does that and how this could, you know, play out, right?
Right.
Again, it's always important, I think, to think of the larger question about how what you're doing this semester might apply to the larger community, right? Like your own neighborhood, not just North End where we're working.
Okay.
I'm still looking on the map, and I'm starting to. I won't let go of my pit bull. I'll stop. All right. Any other comments or questions?
I don't think so. I think that helped a lot. So
Is it raining out there today?
it was a little bit, yeah.
It rained a lot today.
Quit yet or not?
Yeah, I think it's going to rain the next 3 days. I don't think they'll start my fence till next week.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Zach, have a great night, and let me know if you have any questions over the weekend, okay? Because I'm around.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. You have a good one too.
You too. Hey, Thomas, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Let me hold. I'm trying to move my cursor from one screen to the next. There we go. Got the lights off. That's right.
I don't know if I was gonna say I don't know if I turn. It's probably worse, more backlit than anything.
No worries.
Library threw me a curveball. They closed at 8 o'clock. I'm going, okay, 8 o'clock. If I'm in the middle of talking, I don't want them to have to move. So it's like, crap. What library closes at 8 o'clock during the weekday?
I know. Is it raining out there?
It's starting to come in from Chicago way. It's
Really?
moving west. So
It's moving west?
it's coming in from the east. It's moving to the west. That's
usually
weird.
That's usually not a good sign. That usually means that you're going to get a good soaking because it's picking up all the water right off of the lake.
Oh yeah, a lot of lake effect rain.
And what city are you in again?
I live in Crystal Lake, but I'm Crystal Lake, Algonquin area, roughly 5 miles, 10 miles north of Elgin, Illinois.
So we have a friend that has a house in Elgin, a vacation house.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Isn't that like a really desirable location?
Parts of Elgin are, and parts of it, you've told everybody about Highland Park. You want to stay out of it.
Oh wow! So Elgin, Algonquin, Crystal Lake. Wow. Oh yeah, you're north and west. So you're in Crystal Lake. That's where you live.
Yes.
You're closer to, Wisconsin's border than you are to Chicago.
Pretty much. I think I can be up in Wisconsin in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
But with the rails, the transit and all that, I can get to Chicago in an hour and a half by train, and then jump on the L system there and go anyplace else.
Sure.
Which is nice. I've done that several times already. It's a lot cheaper than trying to pay for parking downtown.
Right. Yeah, you're way out. That's very interesting. I guess I didn't realize that. You're the first person from that part of the world that I've ever met. Good for you.
Especially since I originally grew up in the Monroe area.
I know, that's extraordinary.
Went from Monroe after I graduated from Lawrence, I got a position up in Gaylord. I was up there till 2007.
Working for an architect there?
I started off working for a general contractor, design builder.
Who was
And
that?
then they're out of business now. It was North Central Construction,
I see.
NCCI. And then Brad Butcher started
I know Brad.
I started working for Brad about a year after he opened his practice up there.
So Bradley did that so he could do all of that Bay Harbor work.
Which at first he was told to stay out because he was partners with Alexander Bogarts,
Right.
who was really into Bay Harbor. He said,
Yep.
I don't care what you do, you stay out of Bay Harbor. But when Brad went out on his own, we was able to buy out Alexander. First thing he did was he had some clients that had Bay Harbor work.
So Bradley did the copper gutters and downspouts on our house. And yeah, I like him a lot. He's funny. He's just like a classic frat boy, you know.
And when 911 hit, it tore him up because he had to start downsizing his office, and
I know.
that hit him pretty good. But
Yeah, now he's Butcher and Becker, or Butcher Construction now.
well, he must have just did that. Last I knew, he was with Cyan Architects or Cyan Group.
No.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah,
Last time I talked to him was probably 2 years ago.
yeah.
I think I worked for another one of Lawrence's graduates. From Brad's office, I started working for DM Architects. Anthony Essen, Tony Essen. I think he said he graduated from Lawrence at one time.
Essen?
I don't remember. Essen.
And where's that office?
It used to be in Gaylord also. Their meat and potatoes was nothing but schools. And then when
I don't know this firm.
they closed probably in 2003
What took you to Chicagoland?
to work for an architect. After, shoot, why can't I think all of a sudden? Oh,
In Chicago proper?
no, he was in River Forest.
Oh, nice area.
Oh, why can't I think of it? He was right on the corner of Lake Street and I can't think of that road either. Right down from Dominican. We were like about 1 mile from Oak Park itself.
Wow.
It was. I'm sure if I looked it up.
And when did you arrive there?
I moved down here in 2007,
Wow, just before the crash.
and I was hoping with it being a larger city, a larger draw, even if it slowed down, maybe I wouldn't experience that again. And in 2011, it slowed down just enough that they had to let more office staff go.
Right.
And by that point, with my age and without a degree, everybody was pretty much looking, saying, you're too old to work as a draftsman and you can't get licensed. So we're being real picky right now.
Because you can't be.
Right. And they still can be.
Yeah.
Every so often, shoot, I can't think of names all of a sudden. Some of the headhunters from the area, every so often they'll call, and as soon as I tell them my background and how long I've been out of architecture, they went, we probably can't help you out too much right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the writing was on the wall. If I wanted to stay in architecture, I had one or two choices: either stay in and get a degree or find some other career.
Right.
So
yeah, so I admire you for trying to stick with this. It's definitely tough. How old did you say you were?
I'm 43 this year.
Good for you. Well, I'm older than you, but I think when I recall being 43, which was 15, 16 years ago, it was not easy to have the sort of focus on what you were doing in the evening, particularly at the end of a work day, at the end of the day that you've had, right, and what you and what you do, whatever it is that you do, if it's whether it's right driving the bus or working as a carpenter or being a school teacher or flipping burgers at McDonald's. Work is hard. And that's why they call it work. And at the end of the day, you want to stop working, but it's difficult to do that when you have to sort of bear down on the books. So I'm definitely
some cases.
Go ahead.
I says in some cases, having experience is hurting me a little bit because I'm starting to combine all this stuff in my head. After Monday, I'm going, you can't combine stuff in your head. You got to wait see what direction we're going in.
Right.
Because I started going, okay, you're saying side, I'm going, okay, where am I going to go at? Start looking at that, and I'm missed that it was just a floor plan exercise. Sure. And I was kicking myself in the butt all day Monday when I realized what I had done. It's like, you idiot, you should have known better.
Well, do you have that now? Do you want to show that now and go over that?
I do have something.
Let's look at it.
Oops, wait a minute. Share first. And then there we are. Pretty much our overall site that everybody was looking at.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit sidetracked. I went ahead and did this composite. I also went through this area and took a stab at showing all the parcels. I think I've got it close, but
good.
It'll probably help later on. And then just a blow up of where I'm narrow it down a little bit more to.
Sure.
Reason I went with this one, it's on a Smith Street. It's not really heavily traveled, so a lot of people don't like a lot of vehicle travel going back and forth. This would be more local. And some of these houses by Google Earth look like they were still habitable, or at least could be salvaged. And really, the only thing I was concentrating on is the shell itself intact?
Right.
Because if I'm right, during this time period when these houses were built, balloon framing was prevalent, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Rather
it was. Platform. There's probably some balloon framing here.
Which, if it's balloon framing, I could probably rearrange those floors however I want without really affecting the structural integrity of the building, because those walls wouldn't have been there when the roof went on.
Right.
If I understand balloon framing right.
I don't know that I would hinge anything on that assumption, but you could talk about it a little bit. Yeah, so this is a very interesting site. So one thing that I've noticed here on Smith Street is that, like your site plan is showing some of the houses there. In an earlier conversation we were having, there was a house that was there in Street View, two houses that were there in Street View,
right,
and then one was missing, and now in your view, two are missing.
The two closest to brush.
Right, exactly, right where your cursor is, right. Tom. So that's kind of
right. The one that had the plywood put on the front to
yes, sir.
Seal it back up, and then the one with the porch falling off.
Yeah, that was a nice house that could have been salvaged.
It looked like the porch also had a porch above it from the second floor.
Right.
Which was
like a tree fell through it or something like that, and they just never. Anyways, that house is gone, and that's been the frustration with Detroit and with the city. We've talked a lot about that tonight. You may have been party to some of those conversations, but I would definitely double check with the boots on the ground team to make sure that what the map is showing is what is there still.
By the photos, the three on the west part of Smith are still there.
Yes, they are.
But I couldn't tell about this one loner house that's left.
And that's not a great house, so I would be surprised if it's still there.
But I'm looking at these things going, if we're trying to renovate Detroit, why are we knocking down homes that we could possibly use? If we can renovate them and then rent them or even sell them, it's going to be a lower cost than a brand new home altogether.
Well, there's people that might say, yeah, maybe not, because we're going to end up with total guts, and you might as, if you're going to total gut, you're replacing everything in them because they're stripped down to the studs.
Right.
These homes are.
But if the shell's intact, I'm going, okay, I don't have to pay
No,
for a
I
foundation.
appreciate what you're saying, Tom.
I don't have to pay
And
for a
I
shell.
think that is the position that you need to take. That
But
you have kind of a responsibility given the vacuous sort of like site condition, right? Where so many properties are vacant, so many properties have been, erased, that wherever there's a little notion of history and vacancy and building, it's kind of our obligation, thank you, of preserving that, because those houses do tell a story, and it's worth letting them maintain that storyline for the work. And so for this class, I think I'm trying to protect you from the onslaught if you do decide to tear them down, because you're going to run into people that are going to buzzsaw that decision of tearing them down.
where if you're going to try to sell them to people
in the critic pool, in the jury pool, right?
Right. Where if you're trying to make it to where people within this neighborhood can take possession of them again, some of the demographics I found show they probably couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to renovate these things. They're going to sit here empty, and they're going to go blighted again.
That's right.
But the other nice thing about the site, you have these vacant areas. Some people may not want a renovated home. They may want a new one. So
That's
we
right.
could give them both with this particular stretch.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a little bit of a challenge because some of these properties are only 30 feet long or wide, but.
And that's why I was just showing Zach the office of Jonathan Tate. Did you happen to?
Yes, I came in about halfway through Mariah's presentation.
Okay, good. And so, so his skinny house stuff is really, really compelling to me because he's building on those urban lots in New Orleans, which, is a different grid system altogether. And it would be in where there are alleys in the back and you park on the street, for example. So that's kind of a comparable DNA to our lot. So I would definitely look at the skinny house type, look at his work, and begin sort of thinking about how your site might deploy. But like with Zach, I want to talk about your unit first. So can you maybe scroll up to that? Because I think I saw something.
Over here. Come on. Let me zoom back out.
There we go.
I actually have two different units. I already started thinking about using a garage as a studio space up above. So I kept this running through my head, and this is what I ended up coming up with.
So this is a 2-car garage.
2-car garage.
Separated.
2 separate.
I'm
assuming that
my house has 1 car and your house has another, correct?
Right.
Separate stairways.
Separate stairways, entrances from the side. Petite little kitchen, sleeping area, and then adequate bathroom off the side.
These are nice.
I was keeping missing middle housing in the back of my head when I'm doing these, going, okay, how small can I go, but still something that I would want to live in.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing here is, I guess I'm seeing a ridge down the middle, which is the demising wall between both units, right?
Right.
And then the entrances off of the stairs are coming in at a dormer.
Correct.
Located in the middle of that depth of the garage.
Right.
Nice.
The only bad thing is we have the center wall and you sleeping against each other, but there's not much I don't think I could do about that. I did miss the closet.
What do you mean the bad thing? The sound transmission?
The sound transmission.
Yeah,
but
well, there you just do. I mean, if it was an apartment building, right, you would. So that wall could be like, think this through, right? There's like, if you look at the UL book, or if you look at a Gypsum Association book for walls and wall construction that achieve high sound transmission, coefficients. You can do double studs. You can do
Right.
1 layer of 5/8 on one side. You do 2 layers of 5/8 with a resilient channel on the other side, so that sound doesn't migrate, right?
I forgot about that.
Right. You do gaskets at the bottom and the top, so that sound in the walls doesn't like activate or tickle the floor deck or the ceiling deck, right? Those are ways that you deal with that stuff. And then you insulate the wall. You know, the denser the wall, the heavier the wall, right? The more sound absorptive the construction is. So there's ways to deal with that. And you insulate the ceiling. You have to make sure
Right.
that you take the insulation up the wall and then you take it across the ceiling so that it doesn't kind of like jump
You fully-
over the fence.
You fully box
So-
it in from one another.
Right. So I think that's good. So maybe some things that I would think about is like if I would show a car in here, and I would show
Okay.
like a lawnmower and some bicycles, and to show how the garage is really pimped out, right? And is fully accessorized. And then I would show, I would also struggle to find more ways to bring natural light into this unit. Because think about it, you got the little window in the bathroom, which could be
Right.
bigger. And if that bathroom door is closed, then all of the light that it's bringing in to the unit is denied, correct? So that's
Right.
maybe one thing. I actually don't mind windows in the bathroom. You can do things like curtains, but letting more light into the bathroom is actually a positive thing. And then
Right.
you've done an identical window in the kitchen, and I think that could actually be double windows.
Or if I, instead of doing a flat roof, if I just let it become a cathedral ceiling, I could put windows above the cabinetry.
That's true. That's another option. And then the door probably wants to be a glass door, and then
Right.
the wall that has the door on it probably wants another window in it as well. So thinking of, because the living room is the bedroom, and the living room is the place where you're going to want to have some view of the outside. And
Right.
and your one view is rewarded by the kitchen, the other view is denied, right, by the bathroom. But the bathroom's very nice. The bathroom's really well done, and the unit is really well done. If I was a college student, right, I'd take that unit all day long.
When I was doing this, I was thinking, okay, this is probably going to be somebody that just needs some place to sleep and shower. They're always on the go. They're never going to be here all that often.
Right.
Similar to that Seattle article you posted for us. That's the one person they interviewed. She said, I just need someplace safe to sleep.
Yep.
I'm always out on the town. I'm always at work. I'm not here that often.
Right. And
So
this is also kind of a universal design, right? This is something that will translate for not only the college student or the pre-med student, right, or the doctor who works those ridiculous shifts, right? It also works for maybe someone who is on a fixed income, right, and is simply just trying to live within their means, right? I think a couple could live here quite easily.
A young couple just starting off.
Exactly. So there's, so I might show this as kind of like in a couple more ways. I might show the elevations of this, as you carry this forward, right, Thomas? Show
Right.
the elevations of this. Show this in cross section, right? Like a cross section through the kitchen, a cross section through the bedroom, and let us understand it more. And then this becomes kind of a design motif for sort of everything you're doing, right? And then start designing a bunch of garages that double function like this does as storage and for cars and other elements, and then is also a home. And what if there could be like a 2-story or a 3-story garage? What's the possibility of that, for example?
I wonder if this could be rotated. You go up to this as one entrance, you have
Yep.
another stair coming up here. And then
Exactly. And that might be a flat roof building that doesn't have to sort of like dance in the question of dormers and ridges, right? It might be just easier, and you might be able to produce something bigger. And so the unit is really the footprint of the garage itself.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about a flat roof. And
Well,
this is a square roof, so you could
can have a
easily
sloping
twist it.
roof, but it has a flat parapet. So
Right.
it looks like a cube, but it has a sloping roof that drains to a gutter and a downspout to the side opposite the driveway.
And
Like
if
the way,
this is
the way every flat roof building is, it's never flat. It's always got
a slight slope.
a pretty dramatic slope.
And with this is accessed off the alleyway, you really won't see it from Smith or
That's right.
Brush. So you have a little bit more leniency with this one as to the design.
Yeah.
Okay. If I
Could
did
be.
do
It could be like this. Could be like a cell for 2 families, 4 families, or 2 families on where one is on 3 and one is on 2. So there's like another iteration in the current studio plan where it's 1 unit. And then there's another iteration where you do this as a 3-story building. You follow?
Yes.
These are also nice drawings. I like Mariah's drawings because they were clean and dimension. These are really good. These are really clean.
Some of this, I just learned on some of the shading last term in Advanced Revit. I didn't realize some of the things you could do with it.
Cool. Did you have another set of drawings too? Do you want to go over something else?
Yes. Regular house set with this one.
So is this what you're guessing is in the house?
No, this was just.
Is
A
this an
floor plan.
ideal?
This is an idea that
Okay,
could
so
be
this is an
tweaked,
ideal
pushed,
villa.
pulled. What my thinking with this was, first floor would be have an actual bedroom in it for a 1-bedroom. Then we go. Each one has almost a separate entrance except for the second floor. So
Wait,
this would be
so
like
this is a duplex with
This is
a front on the street and on the alley or in the back
Right.
garden.
Right. This is a 2-story building. Like you said, you enter the first 1 unit from the street. You enter the second floor from the side, and then the back unit from the alley side.
Gotcha. How long is this?
50. Let me zoom in on it.
Your dimensions could be a little smaller.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
It was one thing I was going to check
You just
and
zoomed in and they
forgot
actually
about it.
got smaller when you zoomed them in.
63 feet
hmm
for the upstairs.
And what are they, 25
feet
wide?
25 wide, 51 feet on the first floor, 63 feet for the second floor. And the one.
Yeah, so
With
those
the-
are like 800 square foot units.
Actually, the first floor, the 1-bedroom units are 535 square foot.
Because you have the stairway in there, too.
Right, took the stairway out.
Yeah.
And the second floor is hitting 660 square feet for the
Yeah.
2-bedroom.
So Thomas, if this thing repeated like mirrored, then the wall that like you could do 2 of these side by side, I think, pretty comfortably. But the bedroom, I'm sorry, but the bedroom and bathroom walls would be solid, so the bathrooms would not have daylight, and the bedrooms would only have light from the short wall at each end, like the front and the back.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, unfortunately, on the second floor, if we mirrored it along the bedroom side, I can have this bedroom here because there's no way to get out.
No, I'm saying on the left-hand
On the-
unit, Thomas.
Left-hand unit.
If you took the
here?
left-hand unit and mirrored
yes.
it about that right wall, yes,
Right.
you would lose the windows in that wall.
Right.
Here's the problem with that, and it's a small one. The bedrooms would only have the windows on the street walls and the alley wall, which is okay.
Right.
And the bathrooms would be dark of natural
Right.
light. That would be okay too. Not ideal, but you know, given the choice. So that could be like a side-by-side duplex.
Right. I wonder if there was a way to. Oh,
That could actually be an 8-plex, right? Because what you're showing on the left is 2/2, correct?
correct. So I have 4.
Yeah,
And
but
then
you
if you
could do
mirror the
8.
bottom,
You could do an 8-plex if they're side by side,
right.
right?
And then I didn't know how, if I didn't want to open a can of worms without knowing where it ended up. But if I went into this attic space, I wasn't sure if I could put just a studio up there too.
It depends on. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the design of the unit itself, right? The shape and the.
And I didn't want to eat up my time chasing a rabbit
Yeah.
that might turn into a skunk.
So can we that's good. What's the other line I like to use? It's if the juice is worth the squeeze.
Right. The other thing I was toying with, I didn't really show much storage in these things. If there's a basement down here, partition the basement off, and
Yeah,
maybe
you would do
have
that.
their
And then
storage
that's
down
where
there.
mechanical would be, and
And that's what this X'd out area is.
yeah.
It's probably not big enough at this point.
Oh no,
That's-
it's plenty big. Residential construction, most of that stuff just comes right up through the floor or through the walls.
Right.
If you provided a chase in any residential construction, they'll use it to bring refrigerant lines and all that stuff in.
Everything.
Yeah, all the vents will run up that. It'll be nice and tidy.
And the first floor will be fed from underneath from the basement itself or crawl space, whatever it's
Yep.
being.
Then the outside walls or major walls inside, like that shaft, will bring heat to the
second floor.
unit. Or you do, mechanical units on the roof and then drop it down from there. There's a couple of ways to skin the cat. So let's look at the right-hand unit. So the bedroom on the outside wall is a little shallower. It's a little cozier, and the living room and kitchen area is a lot longer in this one.
Right. Which I needed to do in order to give a little extra
Do the
space for the
Jacksonville
second
bedroom scenario. Yeah. I went into an apartment today in Detroit that has this layout. Very interesting. How big is that apartment, Thomas?
The one on the right,
Yes, sir.
the 2-bedroom is 660 square feet. And the 1-bedroom I was showing on the left was 535.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay. Anything else?
I listened to everybody else's. I guess I started, like I mentioned before, I started combining things up at this point. These floor plans almost going on a different path, and the research going on another path until they meet up at some point,
Mm-hmm.
to where it's more of an example to us showing we have this. Now here's another change to it. You have to adapt your design to this new
Sure,
set
that's
of,
another way to look at it.
research. I just need to make sure I don't try to jump the gun or go too far with something.
Mhm.
Would that be fair to say with something I've already done?
Yeah, I mean, for what you did, what I asked you all to do, right? You're missing some front doors off of the stairway into the building itself.
This was actually the second floor to this first floor.
Oh, so I see.
The two stacked over one another.
I didn't follow that.
So this hidden line that's
It's
right above
the
where it says
overhead
first floor,
line. Yeah.
that's the overhang from the second floor.
Now I
But-
understand.
But like you were looking at it, I guess that's one way to adapt it really easy.
Yeah, that's the
The
adaptation.
one on the right could be if you could get by with a longer design,
Yes.
you could have two that's stacked on top of one another,
That's correct.
or if you wanted to provide more one-bedroom units than two-bedroom,
That's exactly right. So now you have like 2 units, and you have the carriage house / garage.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? You've already got 3 typologies for your site.
which could easily be changed.
That's where I'm trying to take you guys. I tried to let you like get into design right away by designing the ideal villa, right? The ideal unit, without any sense of context or like program or user group or anything like that. Just to look at it as a pure exercise and just to get a sense from you of what you were capable of drawing and how you would approach it and how you'd talk about it. And that was why it was interesting. And I was a little bummed that you didn't show it on Monday night, but
I wish I would have had it for Monday. I mean, this was what I would have had.
This is perfect. But now what we're trying to do is trying to like say, okay, you did this stuff on Monday, and now tonight we're talking about the site, and we're trying to dial in the site, right? Now, can what we did on Monday actually work? Can it leapfrog and work with what we're looking at for the site plan? And I think that's kind of the way to think about it. And then then you're going to show that and array it and compose it on the site in an effort to like promote maximum units per acre. And what does that mean? And how do you compute that? How do you arrange it? And how do you like get into these units? What is the experience outside of the building? What are the pathways like? Is it covered? Is it partially covered? How is it landscaped, right? What is the experience coming in and out of the buildings and going up into the garage from the garden and all? What is all of that like? Thinking about the site as a total experience, because you've already started to think about, and I think admirably so, the experience inside of the unit. Now you've got to start taking it out to the site. And then you're going to find, oh, wow, these units need to actually be a lot shorter. I'm just saying, not that they do. I'm just saying you may have deduced from your research, say, oh, God, these are too short or too long. I need to shorten them, and I need to widen them so that it works with the site. That's going to cause you to revisit the units. And you know what, Thomas? That's how it works. That's how you work in an office. You're always kind of like going back and forth. It's never this linear. I was talking to, I think, Nathan earlier today. It's never this like pure linear thing. First the plans, then the ceiling plans, then the sections, then the elevations. It's always like moving. It's like when you hit a pool, when you're playing pool or billiards, you hit the balls scatter all over the place, and each time you hit the cue ball, it's a whole new set of circumstance. The game is always changing as you're playing the game, and you can go like several hits of the cue ball without sinking anything, but it's a whole new series of configurations. And honestly, that's what design is like.
We had this, the one contractor I worked for first, and then started working for Brad. He bought this nice piece of property from the DNR, and him and his wife started designing this house for it, and they had Brad start it. Brad finally looked at me and said, I don't care how many hours overnight you have to pull, get this thing out of here. Every day he was calling saying, we want to make this change to it. We want to make this change to it. We want to make this change to it. A week went by with this, and we're way past our budget. So we gave him the plan. He came back with changes. Brad said, now you got to start paying for the changes. So they didn't like the plan. They went to another architect. Did the same thing. Started building the house. You're going to love this. His carpenters were building it. They finally said, we're going to stand the wall up. We're going to hold it up for your wife. If she likes it there, we're going to nail it down. Otherwise, we're going to move it to where she likes it. That's the only way they got the house built.
Unbelievable.
Design was never done.
I was talking today with a team that we have in our office that's doing a residence, and the way they started to describe the budget and the client and what we're doing for them and the kind of like interior aesthetic that they like, I quickly concluded that this was going to be, a budget of this much per square foot, and that they were going to be someone that we needed to hold their hand, right? That we needed to service with solicitousness, right? We needed to give them all of our undivided attention. And I said that this is going to be probably a 1.5 year long project. And they're like, everyone's like, what, to design and build it? I go, no, to design it. And they're like, oh, we don't have that kind of fee. I go, well, then we need to be careful about what we deliver, so we protect the fee and give them what they want. But we need to have the conversation with them that if they have caviar taste and hot dog budgets, we have to find a way to deliver to them what they can afford, right?
Right.
So it's a very interesting dance. But in the financial free world of the design studio, Thomas, that's what you go through. And with Revit, you can save as, right, those files and make those changes to shrink or stretch one way or the other. You can modify those things really, really quickly. And so while you're sitting there going, oh, wow, I got to create, 6 or 8 new plans, Thomas, it's a lot easier than you think. You're still hanging on to the old way we used to think, where we used to draw, on paper with pencil, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot faster.
And whenever a client said, well, I want to do this revision, it was, okay, this is now we're going to B.
Yeah.
Well, we want to make another change. Okay, now we're going to C. So that way we had not only the paper trail of all these changes you're making, but if they say, oh, I don't like this anymore, go back to this one, it's like, okay, so I can just go back to this one.
Yeah, that was K. That was K1 or K2. And here's it is dated July 23rd, 2013.
Sometimes they came back and said, why are you charging so much? What would you like to see that we've done? Every time you called up, we had 10 hours worth of changes. It's
really tough. That's part of what you have to explain, that design takes time. We aren't making widgets where, like things that are on a conveyor belt that come down the line. It's a process. And I think design is also, it's important that you let the parameters of the design influence decisions, so that ultimately, what you create is kind of the inevitable, right? That what you're doing is inevitably linked to the restrictions that were set up. And part of the problem with a studio like a graduate studio is, like, you're looking at the site and there's nothing on it, and you're saying, well, I can do anything. I'm like, well, wait a minute. No, it's not a correct statement to say that there's nothing on it. There's sidewalks, there's power lines, there's trees, there's alleys, there's existing buildings, there's bike lanes. Oh, well, I know those things are there. I go, but those are things. Those are influencers, and you need to simply stop habituating those things, right? And integrate those things and let those things become part of the parameter. And then there are lot lines, things you don't see, right? There are setbacks, there are building heights, there are open space requirements, all things that we don't see and owners don't see. As architects, we do though have that ability to see those things, and we have to make those things visible and legible on our site plans. Again, those are things that begin to continue and continue to establish the parameters, right? Mm-hmm. The definers of how we as creatives can work. So the more you introduce the parameters, the more the more the parameters are like stakeholders in the project, the more creativity comes from those challenges. I've always believed that. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. But just because there's not a house on it doesn't mean these lots are vacant. I think that's maybe one way, that would be a very refreshing way for you all to think about them, that they still have history. It's just been kind of erased. It's like the way that your fifth grade teacher used to erase the blackboard to write a new like sentence for your English lesson, but you could still see like the fox jumped over the moon. You know, I kind of see it through the.
Or you see the chalk dust. She erased it, but the chalk dust is still there on the green board. And
that's what I'm saying. And so, like that's kind of what we have here, right? So, anyways,
like you were saying with the corner on Smith and Brush, those are. Why did they broke them up like that? Who knows? But what can you do with those now?
Smith and Brush. Oh, wait, I got to go back to where we were.
It's the one to the north of the those 3 units they put side by side, right across from Bennett Park or playground.
You know what? I had. Oh, here I have the wrong tab open. Smith and Brush. Yes, exactly.
Crazy.
Exactly.
And it looks like on the north side of that 3 unit, something was attached there at one time, because it wasn't nice brick like it is on the south side of it.
I noticed that too.
I mean, it's there was something there.
It was something there.
Which is, I'm wondering why they split it up. Did they do that so that way they could sell those individual units or get them built? Part of
so
history.
Create a story, right? Create a story. So I would have you. I would have you look at the site that you're looking at and begin to make manifest those hidden things like setbacks and property lines. There's a website that Mariah shared with everybody, makeloveland.com, and
Yes.
begin to understand your boundaries in terms of those individual parcels and document what's there and start riffing and elaborating, right? Improvising on your unit layouts based on what you have the room to do in your lot, and let those maybe be the infill, and then maybe think about what you do at Brush and Smith as a corner piece, because that may be yet a new improvisation of the units you created for Monday night.
Okay.
That's where we should go from there. Thanks for hanging around in the bus tonight. What are you going to do when it gets like 17 degrees out? How do you keep warm in that thing? You don't want to talk about it yet.
I have a blanket I'll cover up with, at least on my lap. Usually by then it's indoor sports, and I'll go inside at that point.
Okay, so if I hear you're chattering, I'll know that the temperature's starting to fall a little bit west of here.
Well, if I start chattering and I'm stuck in the bus, I can't go inside. The bus gets turned on, so I've learned 2 years ago I don't freeze. Or else I will find the nearest restaurant or library or someplace to go hang out at.
Even if you do like a restaurant, Thomas, you might want to go off of your data plan, because the bandwidth for these like video hangouts is it just munches it up, and it'll never come through for you, I think.
When I was at the rec center that night,
yeah,
it was fine when 3 or 4 of us was on there, but when the whole class was there, it really started slowing down, and I switched over to my bandwidth.
Yeah, cool.
So
okay.
I can switch over easy enough.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
if I can save the bandwidth, I will.
Yeah, I understand that. I just you already know this, but I just want to make sure that you think about it in terms of like class presentations and the synchronous classes that we have.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or points?
Other than, is it somewhere in the sessions as to where we're going? I mean, this is where we're going to for this Monday coming up? Or?
Yeah, I mean, there's no assignment for Monday.
Okay.
I think, again, you're doing a whole bunch, like I was explaining to Mariah earlier, you're all juggling a bunch of tennis balls in the air right now. I have a feeling a couple of them are dropping. First thing you're doing, of course, is researching in the area that you've decided to take care of, and moving that forward, working with the group to template that information and share that information with everyone as it's being produced, right? I really want to encourage you to do that so that that everyone has the information while they're designing, because I'm trying to get you guys to be designing while you're researching. That's the first thing. The second thing is the lessons that we talk about and the general conversations that we're having about design, about urbanism, about the community, about history and Detroit and all of that, and just sort of adding more logs to the fire in that regard. The third thing obviously has been this assignment and understanding the assignment as kind of an ideal a notion about dwelling within, quite honestly, a vacuum, created within a vacuum, and now trying to take that stuff that you've been doing with your site and which is like editing the site and looking at the site and coming to terms with what your boundary is, and then trying to take that stuff that you've done in that vacuum and trying to sort of see if it fits and works or could work on the site, knowing that it might not, and that if it doesn't, or when it doesn't, that you need to start like modifying and improvising on the things you created in the vacuum. And where do you get that from, and what do you do? How do you create that? Then you go back to the missing middle stuff, and maybe it's carriage houses, maybe it's laneway houses, maybe it's townhouses, maybe it's apartments. Start to work with the typologies that they work with and try to employ them. Or maybe, maybe looking at the missing middle stuff, maybe there's actually a new typology. I'm not convinced that they've created all of them. Maybe there's others. So continuing to sort of create, right? So that's how we work. We kind of juggle all these tennis balls in the air. We're inventing, we're responding, we're reacting, we're promoting, we're doing all of those things. So Monday, I will have a conversation with you all, a lecture, but and then we will go into the desk crits just like we've done tonight. But yeah, continuing to move everything forward.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to make sure when I re-listened to the missing parts, I didn't miss something. So.
Nope.
Okay.
And you've all been really good. I've really appreciated how many of you come to all of the sessions, or you stay for all of the sessions on the night that you're here. And a lot of you, hats off to you guys for like being there for those other nights, because you're really getting, I'm not saying the same thing to every person. I can't possibly do that. Right?
Everybody's bringing different ideas to the table, and you're getting these different ideas for each different person. And
yeah,
like with the containers, with
Zach.
Nathan or Zach. I would never thought about containers. Then I started thinking, okay, what if the shell's okay, but the roof is crap? What if you make these little modules inside a factory, brought them to a site, and dropped them within the walls?
Right.
Like that one.
That's what Nathan from the Monday night class was talking about. He had those existing houses that had crappy ass shells, right?
Right.
And the guy, these architects from Germany or whatever, right, built these new houses within, like a ship within a bottle.
Right. It was from the show here in Chicago.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I caught that one.
Good.
Just a little stuff like that you pick up if you miss some of the presentation or the desk crits. Just little things.
Yeah, it's a great class. And I'm the one. Hey, here's the thing. I'm the one that gets to learn all of it because I'm here all 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
That's why you all should end up teaching, because that's where you learn the most.
If you're not learning, you're dying, right?
That's right. Have a great week.
You too.
Thanks, Thomas. Good night, everyone.
Good night.